Hey guys, Chari5 here, and today we're doing another SpeedPaint discussion video, but today we're going to be doing a little something different. So this isn't a thumbnail, as you can tell, but it is still, I think, what I'd consider a SpeedPaint discussion video in regards to me actually discussing something with you guys instead of just being a retrospective, because that's what the thumbnails are. They're more retrospectives on the games I've played, and this time around, what I'm drawing is actually a donation drawing. Every year, I am a part of Extra Life. I've been a part of Extra Life for 2 years, and fortunately, I've been able to, fundraise some money for it. I'm not gonna brag and say like, oh, it's a huge amount of money. Plus, there's no bragging when it comes to charity. It's not like, oh, look at me, I raised this, because I only, donated a part of it. It's people who donated the majority of it. And for that, I am very thankful. But as an incentive for people to donate, I did promise that I'd draw stuff for them. And I'm finally getting around to that because I've been really busy with other stuff. And so expect to see a lot of these videos come out. Now, what I wanted to do with this was actually think of a way to make it more interesting, because I can't just talk about what I'm drawing for the whole video. I mean, I technically could, but I wanted to talk more about I guess, tips as an artist, and I can't say that I am the authority on art or drawings or, anything. I don't even like saying that I'm very good at it, but maybe I can, impart some wisdom or, I don't know, something. Ow. Just hit my knee on the desk. Impart something or leave you guys with something if you're beginning as an artist or if you're looking to maybe find some tips, because there are a lot of people who give out tips on the internet, and that's great. It's great that everyone gives out their little bit of their wisdom so that maybe beginners can find their way into becoming a better artist. But sometimes, what works for some doesn't work for others, and maybe what works for me might work for you, and if it doesn't, then, I'm sorry. I tried. But yeah, today I didn't really know what I was going to talk about during this episode because this is me drawing Tharja as Gregor as Tharja from Fire Emblem Awakening, because one of our moderators and my editor Kyle wanted me to. We had a joke when we played Fire Emblem Awakening, and we married Gregor and Tharja. And just because I thought it would be a really funny, a very funny couple. And we ended up with the joke that what if Tharja had Gregor's face, but I couldn't find a way to make it so that it looked convincing enough. So, or just in my head, I was like, I don't think I can make this look convincing enough that you understand that it's Gregor. So I'll just draw Tharja's body, but with Gregor's head. And it worked out. I think he loved it. I can't say for sure. But what I wanted to talk about today was drawing from life. Now, what I'm drawing here is a man's face, a woman's body, and a hell of a lot of cloth with Tharja's cloak. And the shading can be intimidating when it comes to stuff like this because of the curves and the bends and folds of cloth. Something that I was thinking about while I was watching the footage was how much I like drawing the female form, and I think the reason for it is because I like drawing curves. A lot of my designs are very like rounded and curvy, and like you won't really see a lot of straight lines when it comes to my drawings. And the reason for that is because maybe I have some difficulty drawing straight lines, but I really do enjoy drawing curves. They're just very pleasant to me to look at, and that's part of style, but also, in this case, it has to be part of the anatomy, it has to be part of the shading and all that stuff, and that's where drawing from life comes in. And I think that's one of the main things people will tell you when they're teaching you how to draw or, how to become a better artist. And for the longest time, I didn't necessarily agree, what if you're a cartoonist? You don't have to draw from life there. No, you do kind of have to, because even as a cartoonist, or even like when you're animating cartoons, you still have to make it believable. You have to make the physics and the reality of these characters believable. And that a lot of that comes down to their anatomy, how far they can stretch, how long they can stretch, where their arms can bend, because that's one thing I have a huge issue with, is knowing where I'm going to bend my character's arms, how long I'm going to make them, are they proportional to the body? Because that's another thing too, proportions. I'm terrible at that. I never measure like, oh, how many heads tall is my character? How, the limbs length, the hand size. Looking back, I don't really like the feet of this character because I suck at drawing feet, and also, the angle at which they're drawn and how big they are. I think I did a well enough job, but it could have been better. So even if you're drawing something cartoony, or if you're just starting out or whatever, just draw from life. Like, look at a stock image of a woman on the internet, or a man, or whatever you're trying to draw. Because even when it comes to men, like, men are not as curvy as women, but even so, I draw them sort of curvy, and you'll see that in later episodes, because I do draw like male anatomy later. But you'll learn a lot by drawing from life when it comes to shading. I think light is one of the most important things when it comes to making a piece look good, and I learned that over the years. It really is just trial and error when it comes to shading, and when it comes to well, I wouldn't say trial and error when it comes to anatomy, but you'll figure it out on your own, because I think that is kind of the best way to learn it. Because if you're trying to learn, oh, I want to learn this today, I personally find it kind of difficult unless it's something that I need to know, or that I really want to know. Because if it's something that they're just teaching you, like, oh, today's lesson is this, it gets harder because you're not as interested, because you don't really want to be drawing that. That's not really in your needs right now, or in your interest. But when you're genuinely interested, like, for example, when it comes to me, and, I needed to draw female anatomy this time, so I was a little bit more interested in knowing accurate female anatomy. And whenever I have to draw metal, I experiment with drawing metal. Whenever I have to draw cloth, I experiment with cloth. And I think that's another beauty of this piece right here, is because I pretty much have to shade all three things: skin, cloth, and metal. So when it comes to shading, you can't just shade everything the same way. That was something that I used to do a lot, is just shade everything the same way. But if you'll notice in real life, metal refracts light differently than a sheet of cloth or your skin. All that is reflected differently in the light. Put, I don't know, a knife in sunlight, compare it to your skin, compare it to the shirt you're wearing. You'll see that it's not all reflecting the same, and it's not shaded the same either. It's not dropping the same shadow. The direction of the shadow is also something that you have to notice as well. Check your light sources. Like, all those things are really important. Like, and it sounds like a lot of things to keep in mind, but the more you do it, the more you practice, the easier it'll come to you. The more it'll become second nature, and you'll be like, oh, okay, this is where the light's coming from. Okay, this is not what I want to be drawing. This is not where I want to be putting this light, or, the shade. It'll come to you, and creases and folds. I'm still learning, I'm still learning how to do shading. Like, here, I'm trying to shade the hand, but you'll see me later on actually change the shading of that hand, because I don't like it, because it's folded, it's bended, it's bent, I don't know. It's bent, so it has to naturally cast a different shadow on the knuckles. And just figuring out, like, okay, well, I don't see a light source, I have to make up these shadows on my own. And for the most part, yeah, you do have to make up where the shadows are going to be on your own. One thing I have a really hard time with, and I'd have less of a hard time with it, I definitely would have an easier time with it if I studied more from real life, are angles. I have such a hard... Usually I like drawing a profile of 3/4. Whenever I draw characters, and I think that's also why I really wanted to start with this, because I'm drawing a character. I love drawing portraits. When it comes to scenes, I suck at it. I suck at putting together a scene, but when it comes to drawing a character, it's one of my favorite things. It's one of the things that I find most ease in. It's one of the things I find most joy in doing as well. So when drawing this, I was definitely having a lot of fun with it. And I did kind of end up sort of impressed with it, because like I said, I don't really draw realism too much. And you can say, oh, this isn't realism at all. And you're right, it's not. It's cartoony. But again, despite the fact that it's cartoony, the anatomy is still somewhat accurate, like, it's still based on a real woman's anatomy. not any woman in particular, it was just off the top of my head. Like, I wasn't really using a reference for this other than Tharja herself, Tharja and Gregor. So, like, I was using her as a reference, and for her reference, they had to use, like, the female anatomy. I think she's a little tall for what she is, and I didn't make her as tall in this one. In fact, I think she's a little wider than they normally draw Tharja, but it's all based on real life. It's all based on it had to have been based on an actual woman, as most cartoons are. You check the proportions, you see like, oh, do the limbs make sense? Are they too long for a person's body? Because you'll know if it looks unnatural. Usually, something I've noticed, and this is how I try to do it, your arm will always reach your, like, right above, because I'm sitting down right now, so it doesn't really make sense, but usually when you stand up, your hand is usually ending right before your knee. And in this case, you'll notice that her hand is on her knee, and that's because her legs are a little bit bent. So it's supposed to give that sort of... It's hard to explain. I'm bad at art. Why am I even giving tips? But yeah, like, notice that they're a little bit bent, so it would make a little bit more sense to make her legs a little bit lower than that. Usually, also, one thing I try to do all the time that I wanted to avoid for this is I usually mirror hands a lot. So usually what one hand's doing, the other hand's doing as well. If one's a fist, the other's a fist. If one's open, the other's open. And what I wanted to do was practice, like, okay, can I make it so that both of them are different? Okay, and hands, I've actually discussed with other people before, are the bane of they're the bane of the artist's existence, because they are some of the most difficult things you'll learn how to do. And even then, I have not mastered the art of drawing hands. They were definitely easier now that I'm older and that I have more experience with drawing, but they're still not all the time easy. Like, I'm not 100% happy with Tharja's right hand, which is the one that, Gregor has close to his face. But when it comes to her left hand, I really do like the way I did it, like very front, and, I don't think you can even see the thumb. Or in either of them. I hate drawing thumbs. The way they connect to the rest of the hand is just not fun for me to draw. But yeah, I don't think you can see it. Yeah, you can. I cheat a lot when it comes to that. But yeah, like I'm experimenting with creases here, and cloth is something that I also have a really hard time drawing because of shading. Mostly because of shading, because when it comes to drawing cloth itself, I don't have a hard time at all. I like doing all the creases and folds, but when it comes time to shade, that's going to determine whether or not it looks convincing or not. Because I think that's a more important word, convincing, not so much realistic, because again, you have to draw from reality, but you have to make your fiction look convincing. Even if you're not drawing realism, you at least have to make the fictional thing that you're drawing, or like the cartoon or the anime, whatever it is you're drawing, you have to make it look convincing. You have to make it like understandable and be like, oh, okay, well that makes sense. A lot of the time, I remember when I was younger, I used to make fun of, I guess it's not really, see, like right now I'm shading the hand appropriately, or at least what I think is appropriately. But I used to make fun of, and I don't like saying this because I have no place to make fun of other artists, but professional drawings where I knew the anatomy was wrong, and I feel like I had more credence to say, because I was like, my mindset was, if I can notice that your anatomy is wrong, there's something really wrong, because trust me, I'm not the best at anatomy, and when I know that it's wrong, there's definitely an issue. I remember this one drawing I made fun of a lot, and it made me laugh so much because the character's neck was so elongated, but it was like covered by another character's arm. So it was like, oh yeah, you can't see the neck, just because, and if we drew it appropriately, you wouldn't be able to see the character's face. It would be obstructed by the other character's arm. So to get through that, they just made her head a little bit further out, making her neck longer. But I was like, you can obviously tell her neck is a giraffe. I don't think I have the image anymore, but I'd love to show you guys what I mean. But to me, it was like, it was so funny because I knew how wrong it was. So I loved laughing at that drawing. And I try my best to not run into that situation where it's like, okay, is the neck too long. One thing, I don't have an issue with length. I have an issue with girth when it comes to necks. And when I try to draw from real life, I'm like, okay, this looks too real for what I'm trying to draw. So sometimes there are exceptions. There are always exceptions to the rule, but mostly you'll want to try and there's a saying, art imitates reality, and it's true. And again, even if you're drawing anime, if you're drawing a cartoon, it's best to try to learn from reality. How does light work in real life? How do limbs work in real life? Does it make sense to bend this in the way I'm bending it? You know? Because right now you can't see Tharja's right shoulder, but I think that it kind of makes sense in the context. You can only see her forearm. But it kind of makes sense. And even I'm seeing it right now, I think her hand is god tiny. And that happens a lot with me and art. With me and my art, whenever I'm done with it, I look at it and I'm like, God, everything about this is wrong. But you look at it as a whole and it's like, okay, well, it doesn't look bad. It's like, oh, doesn't it look bad? Look, this is a problem. Her one hand is so tiny. Her feet are goddamn minuscule. One of her feet is way longer than the other. And like, you just start noticing stuff like that. This is the final result. And I hope you learned something from this. I really hope that I'm, not just speaking out of my ass and just trying to sound smart when it comes to this, because I'm just leaving you with the things I know and the things that have kind of taught me how to draw. I hope that you like this piece as well. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next SpeedPaint discussion. I don't know what I'm going to be talking about, but the next SpeedPaint discussion is another donation drawing that I did for actually the same person, and you'll know why in the next video. But until next time, guys, stay safe and stay awesome. This is Char5, signing off.